So Tempe is that one city that's not always what people expect it to be, for better or worse. So today we're going to give you an overview guide and share some places you might want to explore in order to see if it's, your vibe, if it's a good place for you to live. We'll talk about location, commuting, crime, safety, homes, and things to do. I'm Courtney Strelzik. I'm a local East Valley real estate agent, and I used to live in Tempe, so I feel like I know a thing or two. So the first thing we're going to talk about is location, because that is one of those things we can't change and can often be a deal breaker. It's kind of funny because I had a social media post and there was a lot of people that were arguing Tempe, particularly the north part, like where Arizona State University is, that is the center part of Phoenix Metro. And some people got upset about this, but really I understand the sentiment behind it, because you have the Sky Harbor Airport is right there. You have Old Town Scottsdale. You're not that far from Central Phoenix. And you're also directly next to things like the Phoenix Zoo and Papago Park. A huge thing to note is the north and the south part of Tempe are in very different locations. The north part, and we're going to use Arizona State University as like a reference point, you're only 6 minutes from Sky Harbor Airport, you're 13 minutes from Old Town, and then about 15 minutes from Central Phoenix. Now, if you're on the south side, you're probably adding about 10 to 15 minutes to all those locations. It is a little bit further on the outskirts of Phoenix Metro. And the beautiful thing about Tempe is you are in the middle of all the major highways and where they intersect. And I would say this can be a bit of a blessing and a curse. It's very easy access to get everywhere, but you also get a lot more traffic, particularly the north part of Tempe. It's definitely going to be more traffic here than, like Chandler or Gilbert. The 202 and the 101 interchange, and then the 101 and 60 interchange, and then where I-10 runs into the 60. It can get like a gridlock during rush hour. Now, if you're coming from like Southern California, LA, or Atlanta, you're probably not going to think our traffic's that bad here. But if you're from like a smaller town that doesn't really see a lot of traffic, it can be a little bit annoying. But outside of those rush hour times, the traffic does actually move pretty well. Our highway infrastructure was pretty well constructed in this part of town. Now, when I first moved to Arizona 10 years ago, I moved here in the summer and I didn't think the commute was that bad. And then school started and then the weather started getting cooler. So snowbirds came and the traffic became a lot worse. So that's something to note, is usually in the summertime, the traffic isn't quite as bad. It's not quite as congested. The second thing I want to talk about in Tempe is crime. Now I'm going to pull up this map right here. This is from crimegrade.org and it actually looks at crime per capita. Red meaning higher crime rate, down to green meaning lower crime per capita. Now you can see on the north part of Tempe, it does have a higher crime rate per capita, and something to consider, it is a much more urban area and it's a lot more condensed living. Now the further south you go, particularly below Highway 60, it's going to be a much more suburban feel down here, definitely not near as condensed. And an interesting stat from neighborhoodscout.com, another good resource to check out, is the violent crime in Tempe. It was pretty close to what the Arizona median was, but the property crime was actually a fair amount higher. Tempe is a really large city and there's a lot of different neighborhoods across the city. One other resource I would check out, I always have my clients look at this one, is communitycrimemap.com. And this is actually where you can look into a specific area and see what crime was reported in a specific neighborhood. So definitely make sure you check out this resource before buying a home in Tempe. Now, the third thing we're going to talk about are school rankings or schools in Tempe. And this is from niche.com right here. This is actually just looking at the public high schools. And we can see that there's a lot of variance in school ranking. Up north, we see a C. And then as we go further south, we are seeing slightly higher ratings for those high schools. And as someone who's lived here, this makes a lot of sense. I'm sure you've noticed the theme, but the north side is more urban and heavily influenced by the Arizona State University. And as you go further south, it's much more suburban. And as far as private and charter school options, I will say Tempe doesn't have quite as many options as like Chandler or Gilbert or some of the other surrounding cities. But if you're willing to cross the city border, you will have some options there. And something also to keep note of is Arizona is an open enrollment state. So if there are spaces in another school, you can elect to have your child go to that school. But at the end of the day, you know, that north part of Tempe, there's still a lot of families that live up there. It's kind of an eclectic group of people. There's young business professionals. I mean, there's people that work at the university. There's even like a senior community up there. Now, the fourth thing we're going to talk about are homes. And I will say, of all the cities in the East Valley, Tempe probably has the most variety of homes. So we're going to break it into like 3 different sections of Tempe and kind of tell you what you can expect in these areas. Now, on the very north side by ASU, you're going to have, luxury condos, beautiful condos. As I mentioned, there's a 55 plus community there, or a senior community. You're going to have, of course, a lot of student housing. There's even a historic neighborhood there. And then you do have more like traditional single family home neighborhoods. Now, this middle part right here, this becomes a little bit more residential. You're going to have a lot of single family homes and then apartment complexes as well. You will still have some students living in this area, but it's definitely not near as much as directly next to the university. A lot of the homes are more medium-sized homes. I would say like you'll see a lot around 2,000 square feet. They were built in the 70s, and considering the time they were built, we didn't really have as many organized subdivisions. So there's a lot of neighborhoods that do not have HOA in this area. And this area is kind of interesting because for many years, we saw a lot of people purchasing Airbnbs here, which makes a lot of sense. There was no HOA, so you didn't have anyone telling you couldn't have an Airbnb. A lot of the homes did have pools, but it was still in a great location. It was close to the airport, ASU, and a lot of these other things that, Phoenix Metro has to offer. And I do have a lot of people reach out asking to purchase an Airbnb in this area. And this is the thing. It became very oversaturated with Airbnbs, particularly around like 2022 and 23. And more recently, we're seeing a lot of people actually sell their Airbnbs because they just weren't turning the profit that they were hoping to. Now, if you're planning on living here seasonally and maybe you just want to rent out the home while you're not in town just to make a little extra change, it could still be a good option. But if you're actually looking to invest in a home and make a good profit, Airbnb, I'll be honest, it's probably not the best investing strategy here anymore. If you're looking for, a better cash on cash return, I would definitely look at different strategies like pad split or co-living strategies. And these are where people actually rent out by a room. There's usually a pretty good return on these homes if you find the right property. Now, the third area of Tempe is that south side. And this, like I mentioned, is much more residential. You'll actually find homes with pretty large lots in this area. So if you're looking for a large yard, this is definitely the area to look in Tempe. And this is actually one of my favorite areas in the Phoenix East Valley. And the reason for it is, first off, there's a lot of mature vegetation. And even though you're further south in Tempe, when looking at Phoenix Metro as a whole, you're still in a really good location and it's easy to get around. And another thing is you're very close to South Mountain hiking trails. And if you don't know, I love all outdoor activities. So that's definitely a perk of being in this part of Tempe. One thing I do want to point about this area is it throws people off or they're surprised by it, is it's actually more expensive than Chandler or Gilbert. And the reason for this is, generally as a rule of thumb in Phoenix Metro, the further on the outskirts of the city you go, of the metro area you go, it does get a little less expensive. Being in a more central location more often than not comes with a price tag. And I've had some clients who think it's worth it, and then others who are more inclined to go to Chandler and Gilbert just because they can get a little bit better bang for their buck. Now, the fifth thing we're going to talk about are things to do in Tempe. The north part is definitely going to have more going on than the south side. Now, the south side definitely still has great restaurants. There's a lot of parks. There's good coffee shops. And like I mentioned, you're not that far from hiking in South Mountain. But if you have like friends or family coming to visit, you're probably taking them to the north part of Tempe. I mean, you're really close to the Phoenix Zoo. Of course, there's a lot of Arizona State University games up there, a lot more options for restaurants and bars. But if you are curious about some of the best things to do in Tempe, definitely go check out this video right here. I break it down. Thank you so much for your time and have a fantastic day.